They came to my door on a gray afternoon, 1 month after the wedding. I still remember the knock. Firm, rehearsed, like a debt collector who already knows you'll answer. When I opened the door, there stood my new son-in-law, Brad, looking polished in his tailored suit, and beside him a stranger in glasses holding a leather briefcase. "Margaret," Brad said warmly, though his smile didn't touch his eyes. "This is Robert Kane, my attorney. We'd like to discuss your legal obligations as family." Legal obligations. My stomach clenched, but I forced myself to step aside. "Of course."
"Come in."
"Coffee." I served them in my best china, Thomas's old set, the one Brad had admired at Christmas. Kane placed the briefcase on my table and clicked it open with slow, deliberate precision. As Sarah's husband, Brad began smoothly. "I'm entitled to understand our family's financial position. California is a community property state, after all." I stirred cream into my cup, calm on the outside, though my pulse hammered in my throat. Community property means nothing when it comes to an inheritance. "That's interesting," I said lightly, because the properties were left to me alone, not to Sarah. Kane leaned forward, his tone measured. "While technically correct, Mrs. Sullivan, we believe there are grounds for a more equitable arrangement. A trust, for example. You'd maintain control while ensuring smooth succession to Sarah and Brad." He slid a thick document across the polished wood. I let my fingers rest on it, reading lines the way Thomas taught me. Never too fast, always careful for the hidden trap. And there it was, one clause buried deep, giving Brad power of attorney if I ever became incapacitated. Brad's voice turned honey-sweet. "This protects everyone. Family should trust family." I looked up, studying him. His jaw was tight, the kind of tightness men get when they think they're winning but fear the game might change. "Trust," I repeated softly. "That's a powerful word. Tell me, Brad, is transparency part of trust?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Of course." "Then you won't mind providing me with a full financial disclosure from both of you. Assets, debts, income history for the past 5 years. A muscle twitched near his left eye. "That seems invasive," he said carefully. "Invasive?" I tilted my head. "If we're becoming family business partners, shouldn't everything be transparent?" Kane adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Sullivan, Mr. Mitchell's personal finances are hardly. They're completely relevant." I cut in. "I will not put $30 million worth of property into a trust managed by someone whose history I don't know. That would be irresponsible." The silence was thick enough to choke on. Brad leaned back, his smile shrinking. "Margaret, you're overwhelmed by all this. Why don't you take a few weeks to think it over?" I stood, signaling the meeting was over. Overwhelmed? No, Brad. Energized. This is the most interested anyone's been in my financial affairs since Thomas died. They left a few minutes later, their polished shoes echoing down my walkway. I closed the door gently, locking it with a steady hand. My heart was pounding, but my face was calm. Then I walked straight to the phone and dialed the number I'd memorized months earlier. Frank Romano, private investigator, answered with his usual gravelly voice. "Mrs. Sullivan?" "They came," I whispered. "With papers. With a lawyer. They think they've trapped me." "And what did you do?" Frank asked. I looked at the still-warm coffee cups on my table, the untouched pastries between them. My lips curved into a cold smile. "I invited the sharks into my living room," I said softly. "Now it's my turn to set the net." When I finally hung up the phone with Frank, I sat there staring at the empty cups on my table. The smell of coffee still lingered, but my mind had already slipped backward, to the moment this all began. 2 years earlier, when Thomas's heart gave out, my world shattered. He had been my partner in every sense. 40 years of building, of sweating over deals, of driving up and down the California coast until those beachfront properties became ours. Malibu, Carmel, Monterey, names that now sound like jewels but back then felt like weight on my shoulders. He left it all to me, and I promised him I would protect it. Then came Brad. Sarah first brought him home the Christmas after Thomas's funeral. She walked in glowing, her hand tucked into his like she'd found salvation. "Mom," she said, eyes sparkling, "this is Brad. He's been through so much, but he's ready to love again." Brad leaned forward across my dining table, his voice low and warm. "It's a pleasure, Mrs. Sullivan. Sarah speaks so highly of you." I nodded politely, but as I poured wine into his glass, I caught the way his eyes flicked upward, just a second too long, measuring the crystal chandelier. He wasn't admiring. He was calculating. Something in me stiffened. Thomas used to say a man's smile tells you everything. Brad's smile was smooth, white, perfect, but it reminded me of a shark gliding just under the surface. Later that night, when Sarah was out of earshot, I tested him. "So, Brad, what do you do?" His grin widened. "Wealth management, consulting, a little of everything, really. After losing my first wife in that car accident, I needed to rebuild, find purpose." I froze. "I'm sorry to hear that." He lowered his gaze, voice breaking just enough. "She was my world. It's taken years to heal." The words were perfect. Too perfect. A rehearsed tragedy. That night, I washed dishes alone, staring out at the black Pacific through my window. Sarah laughed in the living room, the kind of laugh that makes a mother's heart swell. But all I felt was dread. Months passed. Sarah and Brad were inseparable. Beach walks, Sunday brunches, endless plans for a June wedding. She glowed like she hadn't in years. And me? I smiled, nodded, stayed silent. Because what could I say? That her perfect man felt like a lie? That every time he held her hand, I saw him counting her inheritance? The night he proposed, Sarah rushed over with tears in her eyes. "Mom, he loves me. He wants forever." She held out her ring, her voice trembling with joy. I hugged her, hiding my fear. "I just want you happy." But inside, I whispered to Thomas, "She's walking into the ocean with a shark, and I can't pull her back." The wedding was beautiful, painfully beautiful. Sarah wore my mother's lace dress, the same one I'd worn when I married Thomas. She looked radiant, glowing under the summer sun, while Brad played his role to perfection, the devoted groom, eyes brimming with false devotion. During his vows, he took her hands. "I will protect and cherish you forever." I dabbed my eyes with my handkerchief, not from joy, but from the effort it took not to stand up and scream, "Liar." I sat silent, my heart heavy, while Sarah kissed the man she believed was her savior. And yet, I already knew the truth. Because 3 days earlier, Frank Romano had slid a thick file across his cluttered desk. "Your instincts were right, Mrs. Sullivan," he said. "He's not Brad Mitchell. He's Brandon Michelson. And this." He tapped the file, pages stuffed with names, dates, and accusations. "This is his playbook." Frank slid the folder toward me like a loaded weapon. "Start with the aliases," he said, tapping the tab. "It explains why he always arrives polished and leaves without footprints." I opened the file. Driver's licenses, blurry passport scans, bank applications. The names shifted like tides. Brad Mitchell in California, Brandon Michelson in Arizona, Brent Miles in Nevada. The birth date stayed close, the story never did. 3 marriages, Frank said, his voice flat. All older, all wealthy. 1 widow, 1 divorce and disappear, 1 tragic accident with no death certificate on record. Charges filed, charges withdrawn. He moves before paperwork catches up. I traced a finger over a photocopied police report. How does he make the charges vanish? Pressure, embarrassment, and timing, Frank replied. He convinces them they weren't victims. Or their adult children worry about publicity and shut it down. And sometimes, he tapped a notary stamp. He engineers documents that look clean enough to confuse junior prosecutors. I shut the folder and stared at the office wall. So, I was right to stay quiet at the wedding. Frank nodded. You were right to listen to your gut. But silence can buy him time, too. I remembered the vows, the way Sarah trembled with joy. If I had stood up and exposed him, she would have married him anyway, just to prove me wrong. Probably, Frank said. Which brings us to now. Don't play chicken with a con man. Make him steer. 2 days later, I invited Brad and Kane for coffee. I smiled like a hostess, not prey. Before we discuss any trust, I want full financial disclosures from both of you. Assets, debts, income for 5 years. A muscle ticked near Brad's left eye. That seems invasive, he said carefully. Invasive is asking a widow to hand over a real estate empire, I replied. Transparency is a non-negotiable. Kane cleared his throat. We can provide summaries. Full documentation, I said, and let the silence work. Brad's jaw flexed. Margaret, you're making this adversarial. I'm making it professional. He forced a smile, then stood. We'll be in touch. They left without finishing their coffee. My hands shook only after the door clicked shut. That night, Sarah burst into my kitchen, cheeks flushed, anger hot and bright. Why are you doing this? She demanded. Brad said you treated him like a criminal. Did he tell you why I asked for disclosures? I kept my voice even. Or did he only tell you how to feel about it? He said you're trying to sabotage our marriage, Sarah said, breath catching. You can't stand that I'm happy. I laid the file on the table. I can stand anything except losing you to a lie. Her eyes dropped to the folder. What is that? Documentation, I said. Aliases, filings, women who... You investigated my husband? Her voice cracked. You went behind my back? I investigated a stranger who wants your future, I said quietly. A man with names that don't stay put. She hugged her arms around herself, wounded. This is cruel. What's cruel, I whispered, is watching a shark circle and telling myself it's only a reflection. Sarah's chin lifted. I love him, Mom. He loves me. Does he love you? I asked, or the key you carried in my front door? Tears filled her eyes. I can't believe you'd say that. I swallowed hard. I would rather lose you for a season than lose you forever. She stared at me like I'd become a stranger. If you push him, he'll leave. If he leaves because of questions, I said, he was never here for answers. Sarah flinched as if I'd slapped her. She snatched her purse, backing away. You don't get to control my life. I don't want control, I said, softer now. I want truth. She left without another word. The door thudded shut. My house echoed with the ache. For 3 weeks, she didn't call. My texts went unread. I drove past her apartment twice, saw the lights on, and kept going. I cooked too much food and threw most of it away. I slept with the lamp on like a child afraid of the dark. Frank checked in every few days. He's quiet, he said over the phone. That means he's moving.
How?
New LLC registered in Phoenix by N.R. Kane Holdings. Looks like our lawyer friend moonlights as a shell artist. Brandon attached as consultant. It's a funnel, Mrs. Sullivan. He was building one for you. I gripped the counter. So, the trust was the front door and this is the back? Exactly, Frank said. He wants authority if you're incapacitated. Or failing that, he wants a managing stake with fees. Death by paper. I stood at the window, watching the ocean darken, the horizon a thin knife of fading light. What do I do now? Nothing rash, Frank said. Hold the line. He'll make a mistake when he needs money fast. The days blurred. Laundry, ledgers, the steady hush of waves against the rocks. I paid property taxes and answered emails and pretended not to count the hours since my daughter had last said my name. On the 21st morning, the doorbell rang. I checked the peephole and stopped breathing. Sarah stood there, smaller somehow, her face hollow, her sweater slipping off one shoulder. I opened the door fast, afraid she might vanish if I blinked. "Sweetheart," I said. "Come in." She stepped inside and sat where Brad had once spread his papers. She didn't look at the coffee or the pastries or my trembling hands. She stared at the file. "I need to know everything," she said, her voice sandpapered thin. "Start from the first page." I sat beside her, heart thudding. "Are you sure?" Sarah nodded once. "He left," she whispered. "He said he needed space to think about our future. He took his clothes and his car. And Mom," her voice broke, then steadied like it had learned the cost of shaking, "I think he chose my bank over me." When Sarah finally whispered, "I think he chose my bank over me," my heart clenched. My daughter had walked straight into the arms of a predator, and now she sat in my kitchen with hollow eyes, asking for truth I prayed she was ready to hear. For hours, I went page by page through Frank Romano's file. Every alias. Every marriage that ended in vanishing wives and drained accounts. Every notary stamp that shouldn't exist. Sarah's hands shook as she turned each page, but she never stopped reading. When she finally closed the file, her voice was raw. "Mom, I want him to pay. Not just for me, but for those other women. And for whoever he'll go after next." That was the moment I knew. We would not simply defend ourselves. We would fight. Frank's office smelled of stale coffee and ink. He sat across from us, arms folded. "You're suggesting a sting," he said. "A widow and her daughter luring in a man who may have killed before." "He didn't kill me," Sarah said, her voice firm for the first time in weeks. "But he killed the woman I thought I married. And I won't let him walk away to do it again." Frank rubbed his jaw. "You understand what this means? You have to let him back into your life. Convince him you still love him. Wear a wire. Pretend the betrayal never happened." "I can do that," Sarah said without hesitation. I reached for her hand. "Are you sure? He'll touch you. He'll kiss you. He'll whisper the same lies that broke you. Can you stand it?" Her eyes glistened, but she held my gaze. "You told me once bullies win when decent people do nothing. I won't be polite anymore." That night, Sarah sent the message. "I've been miserable without you. Can we talk? Mom feels terrible. She wants to apologize too." The reply came within minutes. "I knew you'd understand. I love you so much. I'll be home tomorrow." Tomorrow. He called her apartment home, as if vanishing for weeks was nothing but a trip to the store. Frank placed unmarked surveillance outside her complex. Sarah agreed to wear a wire. I would play the grieving mother desperate to mend fences. Together, we would draw him out and let him incriminate himself. The next afternoon, I sat in my car across the street while Sarah waited inside. My earpiece crackled. "He's here," Frank whispered. I heard the apartment door open, then Sarah's trembling voice. "Brad." He answered smoothly, like nothing had happened. "Sarah, baby, I'm so sorry. Your mother's pressure, the questions about finances," I panicked. I was terrified of being hurt again. His manipulation was masterful. He turned abandonment into vulnerability, deception into devotion. If I didn't know the file, I might have believed him. Sarah's voice shook, but she held steady. "I missed you. I just want us back." "I missed you too," he said, his tone velvet. "Every day, I thought about our life together. Our future. The children we'll have. Building something beautiful with your family's resources." There it was, barely 5 minutes back and already steering toward money. Sarah followed our script. "Mom feels terrible. She wants to make things right." "Good," Brad said smoothly. "Your mother was just being protective. I understand. But Sarah, we need to move forward with our financial planning. I've been thinking about it, and I have some ideas." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Frank's voice buzzed. "He's moving fast. Too fast." "What kind of ideas?" Sarah asked. "Well," Brad said, "your mother's properties are vulnerable. Coastal holdings tied up in regulations, climate risks, tax exposure. She needs someone with investment expertise to restructure. Would Mom keep control? Sarah asked carefully. Of course, Brad said. She'd be the managing partner. But we'd protect her assets for the future. For our children's inheritance. Our children. He was already laying claim to grandchildren who didn't exist. Maybe we should all meet, Sarah suggested. Mom, you and me? That's exactly what I hoped you'd say, Brad replied. Is she available tomorrow? Frank hissed through the line. He's rushing. He knows time isn't on his side. Sarah hesitated. She might need more time. Sarah. Brad's tone hardened. Your mother has over 30 million in assets and no protection. Widows are easy targets. She needs family to guide her. If we wait too long, someone else could take advantage. The irony was a blade. He was describing himself while pretending to shield me. Sarah whispered, You're scaring me. I don't mean to scare you. I mean to protect you. But we must act decisively. Tomorrow evening. There was a pause. Then Sarah's voice. Okay. I'll talk to Mom tonight. Perfect, Brad said softly. And Sarah, don't mention the investment details yet. She'll want to research, consult advisors, delay. We can't afford interference. Interference, I thought bitterly. That was his word for the truth. When he finally left, I exhaled the breath I'd been holding. Tomorrow he would come into my house again, flowers in hand, voice dripping apology. And I would serve him wine, smile graciously, and record every word. Only one question haunted me as I drove home. Was I setting a trap for Brad, or was he setting one for me? The phone rang close to midnight, the kind of hour when bad news feels braver. I answered on the second ring. Hello, Margaret, Brad said, calm as a lullaby. You and your investigator don't know the whole story. Victoria Chun is alive. If you want the truth, meet me at 1247 Ocean View Drive in Carmel, one of your properties. I'm not meeting you alone, I said. My voice surprised me, steady, colder than I felt. That's fine, he replied. Bring whoever you need. But come tonight. He hung up. I stood there with the phone in my hand like it still weighed a pound. Sarah rushed into the kitchen, eyes wide. Who was that? Brad, I said. He wants me in Carmel. He says Victoria is there. You're not going, she said. I heard the daughter and the teacher in her voice. Mom, please. Agent Rebecca Martinez arrived within 30 minutes, jacket unbuttoned, badge glinting. We'll escort you, she said. Unmarked units, eyes on the house. If he's bluffing, we shut it down. Sarah grabbed my arm. I'm coming too. No, I said, more sharply than I meant. If this is dangerous, I won't put you in the line of it. And if it isn't, I need to hear without your anger answering for me. Her mouth trembled. You think I'm only angry? I think you're scared, I said softly. So am I. The drive to Carmel was all black water and white lines. The house sat on a cliff, windows catching the moon like open eyes. Brad's rental car waited in the drive, neat as a signature. He stepped out first, hands visible. Agent, he called, respectful, careful. Thank you for coming. Stay where you are, Agent Martinez said. Her voice carried the weight of people who do not guess. Margaret, Brad said, eyes on me now, she's inside. Who? I asked, though I already knew. Victoria, he said. She wants to speak for herself. The front door opened. A woman in a tailored coat stepped into the porch light. Silver hair, bright eyes, posture that would make a boardroom stand up. She looked nothing like a victim. You must be Margaret, she said, extending her hand. I'm Victoria Chun. I'd like to have an honest conversation about Brandon Michelson. Inside, the living room smelled like salt and old wood. Agents took quiet positions along the perimeter. Brad stayed near a window, as if sunlight could vouch for him. Victoria sat forward, hands laced. 2 years ago, I met Brandon at a fundraiser. I was newly widowed. Everyone wanted me to play cards, and fade gently. He treated me like a woman with a mind. Agent Martinez spoke first. Miss Chun, you filed charges. Then withdrew them. My children filed feelings, Victoria said crisply. I filed confusion. She glanced at me. Brandon proposed investments, high risk, high reward. I agreed. I knew what I was doing. Did you lose money? I asked. On some positions, yes, she said. 2 million to be exact. On others, I gained more than 3. Net positive 1.2. Not every risk is a tragedy. She paused. Sometimes the loss is letting people talk you into a smaller life. Agent Martinez's pen scratched across her notebook. Financial elder abuse often looks consensual, Miss Jen. Manipulation can be elegant. Victoria didn't flinch. Elder abuse is when you treat competence as a memory. I am not a memory. Brad spoke then, voice low. I'm not a bank advisor. I'm independent. I don't promise safety. I offer velocity, with disclosure. I turned to him. And the stories? The vanished wives? The notary stamps that outlived the notary. He met my eyes. Investigations, yes. Convictions, no. People see what they fear, Margaret.
Some fear risk.
Some fear the woman who stops asking their permission. The line stung because it wasn't only about him. Victoria looked at me, gentle now. How have they treated you since Thomas passed? As a partner, or as a vault? Do they love your judgment, Margaret, or just your compliance? The words landed like pebbles in a glass. I thought of Sarah's urgent texts about protecting the inheritance, of polite advisors who called me dear, while circling my portfolio like seagulls over bread. I kept my voice level. You're saying he didn't manipulate you? I'm saying I chose, Victoria replied. And when the market slapped me, I still chose. Agent Martinez leaned back. Even if your experience was voluntary, Miss Chun, it doesn't erase other victims. Tonight isn't absolution. Of course, Victoria said. It's testimony. Mine. Silence moved through the room like a tide. I looked at Brad, at the careful shirt, the relentless calm, the talent for stepping exactly where the law couldn't hold him. What do you want from me? I asked. Brad's answer was almost kind. For once, I want you to decide without fear sitting in the chair beside you. You have assets asleep on the coast. I know where money moves before the headlines catch up. Partner with me, on paper that protects you. Test me small. Walk away if I lie. And if you don't lie? I asked. Then your capital gets wind in its lungs, he said. And you get your life back. Agent Martinez closed her notebook. We're done for tonight. She stood, making it an instruction. Mr. Michelson, any further contact goes through counsel. We left with the ocean hissing below the cliff like it wanted to tell on all of us. On the drive back, the agents trailed in a sleepy constellation of headlights. My phone buzzed as Carmel disappeared in the rearview. A new message glowed on the screen. I'm flying to Hong Kong in the morning, Brad texted. Real deals, real oversight. If you want in as a partner, no romance, clean paper, say yes by midnight. If not, I'll assume you prefer safe advisors and slow losses. I stared at the clock on the dashboard. 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes left to choose between fear and risk, between the story they wrote for me and the one I could still write myself. And somewhere inside the hum of tires and tide, I realized the louder danger wasn't a man on the make. It was a life that kept me obedient and small. At 11:59 that night, I pressed send. I'll be ready in the morning. I didn't tell Sarah. I didn't tell Frank. Only my attorney, who prepared a narrow power of attorney giving Sarah control of my affairs if something happened to me. Not because I expected disaster, but because I finally understood the difference between fear and precaution. At 6 a.m., a black sedan pulled into my driveway. Brad stepped out in a gray suit, crisp as an oath. Margaret, he said, opening the door for me. Are you sure? I met his eyes. I'm sure about taking back my life. Everything else we'll figure out as we go. The flight to Hong Kong blurred into hours of hum and whispers. Brad spoke of markets, of connections in Singapore and Seoul, of opportunities to hedge coastal real estate with global hospitality. I listened, silent, weighing every word. In the weeks that followed, I lived a life I hadn't tasted in years. Meetings in glass towers, contracts under fluorescent light, numbers that felt like puzzle pieces finally snapping into place. I demanded independent audits, escrowed funds, third-party verification, every safeguard Thomas would have insisted on. Brad didn't flinch. If anything, he welcomed the oversight.
Test me small, he said.
See if my promises breathe. So I did. We started with a single property sale rolled into a hospitality RIT in Thailand. Within 60 days, the gains were visible. Paper gains, yes, but real enough to turn 30 million into 42 on the books. At night, I sat on balconies overlooking neon rivers, sipping wine I paid for myself. For the first time since Thomas died, I didn't feel like a widow guarding a vault. I felt like a woman making decisions again. 3 months later, I stepped off a plane in San Francisco with a tan, a heavier portfolio, and something even more valuable, my own voice. Sarah was waiting at the gate. She rushed forward, hugging me so hard my ribs ached. I was terrified something happened to you, she whispered. Something did happen, I told her softly. I remembered who I was before everyone decided I was too fragile to live my own life. She pulled back, eyes shining but suspicious. Mom, you were gone for 3 months. With him. Do you trust him now? I shook my head gently. I don't have to trust him. I trust myself. Her mouth trembled. You chose him over me. No, I said, voice low but steady. I chose me over your fear. The words cut. I saw it in her eyes. But I didn't take them back. That evening, Frank came by with a folder. He dropped it onto my dining table, heavier than the last one. While you were winning, he said, he was still playing. We found the seam. I opened it slowly. Forged credentials. Document trails that tied Kane to other victims. A chain of shell companies bleeding fees in the shadows. Even Victoria's glowing statement showed traces of tampering, photoshopped balances among real ones. Frank leaned close. He's good, but he slipped. And now we can use it. Sarah's voice was sharp. So, while Mom was building her fortune, he was building his next fraud? Exactly, Frank said. And the timing isn't random. He's pushing for a public signing, some charity gala on the coast. He wants Margaret to legitimize him in front of witnesses, press included. That's how he cements control. I looked at the folder, the patterns of deceit woven through paper and ink. My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with resolve. Sarah touched my hand. Then we stop him. Not quietly, not in secret.
Public.
Where everyone can see. For the first time in months, our eyes met not as mother and daughter at odds, but as partners. I nodded slowly. If he wants a stage, we'll give him one. Frank's mouth curved into something close to a smile.
Good.
Because the trap we set this time, it won't let him wriggle out. I closed the folder and breathed deep. The tide had turned. This wouldn't be a private chess game anymore. It would be a performance under the lights, with no curtain to hide behind. And this time, I wasn't the widow he underestimated. I was the woman who would make sure the whole world saw the shark stripped of his smile. Frank spread the new folder across my dining table like a surgeon opening a chest. Here's where he slipped, he said, tapping the first page. And once a man like Brandon slips, he bleeds. I leaned in. Photocopies, email headers, screenshots, stamp images. The paper smelled like toner and late nights. Start with the degree, Frank said. Wharton MBA. Impressive on a website. Except the registrar watermark is wrong by 2 years. The seal he used wasn't adopted until after his supposed graduation. I swallowed. So it's forged. Better than forged, Frank said. It's confident. He slid the next sheet forward. And here's the notary's stamp used on his equitable trust templates. Belonged to a notary who died last spring. Documents bearing that seal are dated this summer. Sarah blew out a breath. So, he's signing with a dead hand. Exactly, Frank said. And your friend Kane? He flipped to a flowchart. Shells on shells, LLCs that exist for fees and fog. Same registered agent in 3 states. One escrow officer in the chain got suspended for document tampering. Guess who still uses him off the books? I traced the arrows with my finger. This was going to be my future, I said quietly. Death by paper. Sarah touched my wrist. Not anymore. Frank settled back. He wants to announce a family partnership at the Coastal Charity Gala.
Press.
Donors. Judges' wives. It gives him legitimacy, and it dares you to object in public. Then we object in public, I said. Sarah's voice sharpened.
No. We do more than object. We show.
We make the room watch. I met my daughter's eyes and felt something shift between us. Less heat, more steel. Partners? I asked. Sarah nodded. Partners, she said, and her hand tightened over mine. Frank allowed himself a tired smile.
Good.
Because we'll need choreography. He pulled a legal pad closer. First, credential strike. We'll have Wharton's registrar live on video, ready to confirm no record of Brandon's degree. He will try to pivot, say, executive program, or a different name. Registrar counters with name and date of birth mismatch. I listened, steady. And the notary? Second hit, Frank said. We present the death certificate and the posthumous stamp usage. It's forgery adjacent. Not always enough alone, but in sequence it unravels his clean image. Sarah leaned forward. What about the paperwork he wants Mom to sign? That's our decoy, Frank said. A partnership agreement that voids itself upon any material misrepresentation. He lies on identity, credentials, or authority, boom. Auto revocation. We display the clause on screens the moment he signs. I felt a cold, precise satisfaction. You want me to let him think he's winning, I said. Frank nodded. Con men confess by action, not words. We don't need him to say, I'm stealing. We need him to do something the law can hold. Sarah's voice went low. And the transfer instructions? He always tries to move funds before interference. Frank slid the last page to me. Our escrow is actually undercover. The second he gives an instruction to circumvent counsel or verification, the wire fraud threshold lights up. I looked from the papers to my daughter. This will be public, I said. It will be loud. Good, Sarah replied, and there was nothing polite left in her. Loud means other women will hear it. We rehearsed in my living room until the sun went down. My lines were simple. Measured questions, open hands, the calm of a widow who finally knows where to cut. Sarah would ask the identity question, full legal name for the record, while looking straight into his camera-ready smile. Frank would run the timing on the screen reveals. Registrar at the ready. Notary data queued. The undercover escrow wired into the audio feed. Agent Martinez coordinating in the wings. At one point, Sarah stopped and swallowed hard. Mom, she said, I need to say this before we stand in front of everyone. I turned to her. Say it. I wanted to protect you, Sarah whispered. But I also wanted to control the ending. I was scared of losing you, and of losing the inheritance I thought Dad meant for me. That fear made me cruel. I felt the truth pierce, and then warm. And I was proud, I said. I wanted you to see me as unbreakable. Pride made me reckless. I left without telling you because I was proving a point. She sniffed, then laughed once through tears. We're a pair. We are, I said, and pulled her into my arms. Tomorrow, we'll be a pair under the lights. That night, I sat alone with the ocean, script pages beside my wine glass. The waves sounded like breath, steady in, steady out. I closed my eyes and pictured the room. Tables, silverware, the soft cruelty of small talk, Brad's entrance, Kane's careful posture. I pictured my hand steady on the pen. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. The message was short. Change the venue or the papers burn. I stared at the words until they blurred. Another ping followed. You wanted a show. I prefer fires. I typed with calm fingers. See you under the lights, Brandon. I set the phone down and watched the dark water. Somewhere out there, the tide had already turned. Tomorrow, the room would hear it. Tomorrow, the shark would learn what happens when the widow stops swimming and starts hunting. The gala glittered with chandeliers and champagne, the kind of night where wealth wears a smile and charity feels like theater. The ocean shimmered beyond glass windows, but all eyes were inside, on the stage where reputations rose and fell. Brad arrived exactly as I imagined. Tuxedo sharp, smile polished, Sarah at his side. He carried himself like a man certain the curtain belonged to him. Margaret, he said, kissing my cheek with practiced warmth. Tonight is about family. I smiled, calm and gracious. Yes, Brad. Let's give them a show. We sat at the long table on stage, me in the center, Sarah to my right, Brad to my left, Kane just behind. Guests filled the ballroom, donors whispering over silver forks. Cameras flashed as Brad placed a leather portfolio on the table. Friends, he said smoothly, tonight we honor Thomas Sullivan's legacy by securing the future of his family's properties through a partnership of trust. Applause rippled. My pulse quickened, but my face stayed serene. He opened the portfolio. Margaret will sign this partnership agreement. She'll maintain majority control, while Sarah and I take minority stakes to safeguard the assets. Sarah lifted her chin. For the record, Brad, would you please state your full legal name before the signing? He blinked, just for a heartbeat. Bradley Mitchell. The giant screens behind us lit up with the clause Frank had planted, agreement void upon misrepresentation of identity. Gasp swept the room. A live video call popped onto the screen. Wharton's registrar, voice firm. No record exists of a Bradley Mitchell, date of birth October 14, 1977, having attended or graduated. Kane stammered, reaching for the portfolio. This is unnecessary. Sarah's voice cut him. And the notary? Agent Martinez, seated among the donors, rose. The stamp used in this agreement belonged to a notary deceased since March of this year. Documents dated June carry that same seal. The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, cameras clicking faster now. Brad's smile flickered, but he leaned in, desperate to regain control. Margaret, these are distractions, he said. What matters is protecting your wealth. You need me. I looked him in the eye. Protecting me? Or protecting your fees through Kane's shells? I tapped the decoy agreement. You've been exposed, Brandon Michelson. The name dropped like glass shattering. He tried one last pivot, leaning close, lowering his voice for effect. Margaret, family should trust family. Sign it now, and I'll make sure Sarah is cared for. Escrow officer, I said calmly into the microphone. What instructions did he give you before tonight? The undercover escrow agent stood, voice steady. Mr. Michelson directed me to move properties into the partnership before council could review, illegal under federal law. We have the instructions recorded. The ballroom hushed into stunned silence. FBI agents closed in. Martinez's badge flashed as she spoke. Brandon Michelson, you're under arrest for attempted wire fraud and forgery. Brad's mask cracked for the first time. You set me up, he hissed. No, I said, rising as agents cuffed him. You set yourself up the day you thought a widow couldn't fight back. The crowd burst into applause, whispers mixing with satisfaction. Cameras captured every second. Brad's arrest, Kane's pale face, Sarah gripping my hand like it was a lifeline. When the agents let him out, Sarah turned to me. tears streaming. Mom, you did it. You saved us. I held her close.
No, sweetheart.
We did it. Not by being silent. Not by being polite. By standing under the lights. Later, when the guests had gone and the ballroom echoed with emptiness, I stepped to the microphone one last time. My voice carried to every corner. Grief does not make us helpless. Age does not erase our judgment. And wealth does not make us prey. Tonight wasn't about me. It was about every widow, every mother, every woman told she's too fragile to decide her own future. I paused, letting the words breathe. My lesson is simple. The only approval you need is your own. And once you trust yourself, no predator can take that away. I left the stage to silence thicker than applause, Sarah's arm around mine. For the first time since Thomas died, I didn't feel like a shadow guarding an inheritance. I felt alive, sharp, unbreakable. And as the ocean roared beyond the glass, I knew the tide had carried me somewhere new. Not safe, not quiet, but mine. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've faced betrayal of your own, share your story. Your voice matters.